At what point or points is the tangent line horizontal for f of x equals cosine of x? A horizontal line has a slope of 0. The slope of the tangent line is the derivative. We want to find where we will have a horizontal tangent line or a slope of 0, so we're going to take the derivative of this function f of x and set it equal to 0. The derivative of the cosine of x is the negative sine of x. That's the slope of the tangent line anywhere. We want a horizontal tangent, so we want the slope to equal to 0. So we're going to solve negative sine x equals 0. Let's start by multiplying both sides by negative, and that'll give us sine of x equals 0. And now we need to think of all the locations where the sine of x equals 0. One of those locations is going to be 0, but it also happens at pi, and 2 pi, and 3 pi, and so on and so on. But it also happens on the negative side as well. Negative pi, negative 2 pi, negative 3 pi, and so on that way. There's an infinite number of locations where we have a horizontal tangent line to the graph of f of x equals cosine x. It's all of these. That's one way to write the result, is list them all like so, with the dot, dot, dot to indicate that the pattern goes on forever. But another option is to collectively write this where, if you notice each of the terms up there, it's a number times pi, where that number is an integer, and it can be a positive integer, it can be a negative integer, it can be a 0. So we can just say collectively n pi, where n equals an integer. There's all the x-coordinates. Now what we want to do is find the corresponding y-coordinates to each of those, and we will plug those back into the cosine to find the corresponding y-coordinates. Well, the y-coordinate is going to be f of the x-coordinates, which is n pi, and that'll give us cosine of n pi. Well, here's the thing. If n's a 0, cosine of 0 is a 1. If n's a 1, cosine of pi is a negative 1. If n's a 2, cosine of 2 pi is just like 0, and it goes back to a positive 1. And therefore, we have either a positive 1 if n is a 0 or an even integer, and it comes out to negative 1 if n is an odd integer. Now we can actually collect that together and write it like so. Negative 1 to the nth power, because if n is even, that comes out to positive 1. If n is 0, that again comes out to a positive 1, but if n is an odd number, negative 1 to an odd number is actually a negative 1. And so there's the corresponding y-coordinates to the x-coordinates, and therefore, overall, the tangent line is horizontal at all of these points where n is an integer.